Look up at the night sky right now, because you and I are watching the final days of humanity as a single planet species. In March 2026, the American Space Agency stepped forward and pulled the curtain back on a radically ambitious blueprint for our future in the cosmos. On paper, it looks like a master plan for finally colonizing the lunar surface, which is staggering on its own. But the real shockwave is what happened behind closed doors. The agency itself has violently shed its old skin, transforming into a completely different kind of machine, relentlessly driven organizati on unlike anything the world has witnessed in over half a century. We are truly crossing the threshold. The absolute necessity for this massive cultural shift cuts so much deeper than simply putting a new administrator in the captain's chair. You can feel the tension in the air, a silent but undeniable pressure building. Just beyond our atmosphere, we are standing on the precipice of a brutal, high-stakes power struggle that will physically play out across the gray dust of the moon over the next 10 years. It is no longer just about the romance of exploration or the pursuit of distant scientific knowledge. This is a cold, calculated scramble for territory and resources in the deep vacuum of space, and humanity is watching closely to see who will plant their flag and refuse to leave. If we are being completely honest with ourselves, the old version of the agency was on a direct collision course with failure in this new space race. They were bloated, slow, and entirely unprepared for the reality of modern off-world competition. But this newly forged iteration is stepping up to the launch pad with a ruthless determination to win at any cost. You could feel that exact energy in the room when Administrator Jared Isaacman finally took the stage at headquarters in Washington, D.C. The lights dimmed, the crowd held its breath, and a single heavy word was projected onto the massive screen behind him. It was a statement of intent that echoed across the globe: ignition. That one powerful word violently severed our ties to the past, officially announcing the explosive beginning of a completely transformative era for the American space program. You are watching the exact moment when the comfortable, stagnant status quo was completely thrown out the airlock. In its place, a fierce new directive has taken root. The era of empty promises and endless delays is over. The new mission is beautifully simple but punishingly difficult. Set impossibly high expectations for human survival in deep space, and then ruthlessly meet every single one of them. We are no longer just dreaming about the stars. We are actively packing our bags to move there, standing under those bright lights. Isaacman spoke a difficult truth that most of us have quietly known for years. For decades, our greatest space institution has been stretched incredibly thin, desperately trying to keep every politician and contractor perfectly happy, and in that desperate pursuit to please absolutely everyone, they essentially accomplished nothing of real consequence. We all watched from the sidelines as billions of hard-earned taxpayer dollars evaporated into the atmosphere, completely wasted on canceled projects. We lost years, even decades of irreplaceable progress. But hearing a sitting administrator openly admit that failure feels like a massive breath of fresh air. He did not hold back in explaining exactly why this aggressive pivot has to happen this very second. We are watching the clock run out, and the stakes involve so much more than just burning through massive budgets and losing precious time. We are locked in a fierce, uncompromising competition with the Chinese space program to establish the very first permanent human settlement on the lunar surface. If you think this is just a nostalgic replay of the 1960s, you are completely mistaken. This is an entirely different beast. The survival of future generations is being negotiated right now, in real time, by whoever manages to conquer that hostile cratered high ground first, because this time around, the mission is fundamentally different. It is no longer about snapping a few grainy photographs, planting a fragile nylon flag in the regolith, and leaving a trail of boot prints before rushing back to the safety of Earth. This time we are witnessing the moment humanity goes up there with the explicit intention to stay. Now, you and I have both heard these exact same grand promises echoing from the mouths of ambitious politicians and optimistic administrators for the last 40 years. We know that beautiful words are entirely hollow if they are not backed up by brutal, bending steel and roaring engines. Talk is cheap when the vacuum of space is waiting to kill you. Truly historic leaps forward require incredibly intelligent, bulletproof planning, and ironically a concrete plan is the single biggest thing that has been painfully missing since the very inception of the Artemis lunar program. We have been flying blind for far too long, but right now we are finally seeing the fog clear, better late than never. A carefully detailed, entirely achievable step-by-step blueprint for constructing a permanent human base on the moon has actually arrived on the table. You can almost feel the collective sigh of relief radiating from aerospace engineers all over the planet. We finally have a real map to guide us into the terrifying dark of the unknown. The entire survival strategy kicks off with a massive, controversial overhaul of the lunar landing schedule as we previously understood it. For the absolute biggest shift in the playbook, you need to know that there will be no human boots touching the lunar dust on the Artemis 3 mission. Instead, this highly anticipated flight has been completely reformatted into a high-stakes dress rehearsal that will play out safely in low Earth orbit. We are watching them rewrite the rules of spaceflight in real time, choosing calculated survival over a rushed, reckless glory run. It is a sobering reminder of just how easily the cold void of space can wipe out a crew. If we move too fast, I know what you might be thinking. Slowing down and altering the mission profile probably sounds completely counterintuitive to that aggressive, win-at-all-costs mindset we just talked about, but it is actually the smartest move they could make. The old, outdated plan demanded a terrifyingly blind jump. It expected astronauts to transition straight from Artemis 2, which is merely a crude test flight of the Orion capsule, directly into a lunar descent using an entirely separate, thoroughly unproven human landing system. You do not need to be a rocket scientist to see the fatal flaw in that logic. We are watching them actively choose not to gamble with the fragile lives of our explorers. Sticking to that original roadmap was nothing short of an unachievable fantasy. The sheer risk factor of betting human lives on completely untested hardware was so astronomically high that the rocket practically never would have made it off the launch pad. The engineers knew it. The astronauts knew it, and so the launch window just became a heavy can that politicians continuously kicked further and further down the road with every passing year. We spent a decade watching the dream of deep space colonization slowly suffocate under the weight of impossible expectations and paralyzed leadership, but witnessing them finally cut the cord on that toxic strategy is incredibly validating. Under this newly forged directive, Artemis 3 is going to look completely different and infinitely more rational. We will watch the crewed Orion spacecraft and the massive lunar lander vehicle gracefully meet up in the absolute zero of low Earth orbit to perform a critical rendezvous and docking procedure. Once firmly attached, the astronauts will physically transfer over into the lander to run punishing tests on the life support, communications, and propulsion arrays if the timeline holds. We will also see them suit up in the brand new Lunar spacewalk gear inside the lander airlock for the very first time. They are meticulously practicing how to stay alive before they take the plunge, keeping this critical dress rehearsal firmly anchored in low Earth orbit is a masterclass in survival logistics. It means that when things inevitably break down, and in the brutal environment of space, things always break down, problems can actually be solved. Most importantly, human lives can be saved if a catastrophic failure occurs. Because they are close enough to come home, we already have a solid understanding of how the Orion spacecraft behaves in the vacuum. But this towering new moon lander that is supposed to carry our people down to the lunar surface, that massive piece of machinery, is still a terrifying question mark, hovering right over the future of human space exploration. For so many years, everyone in the industry just naturally assumed that this critical landing vehicle would be a specialized lunar variant of the towering SpaceX Starship. But sitting here right now, watching the chess pieces move, that assumption is no longer a guaranteed reality. Administrator Isaacman has publicly confirmed that Blue Origin has aggressively clawed its way back into the race, putting their massive Blue Moon lander right up against the SpaceX design. The stakes could not possibly be any higher. One or perhaps even both of these colossal machines will be pushed to their absolute breaking point during the Artemis 3 orbital tests. The corporate space race is officially on. Ultimately, this historic honor is going to come down to whoever can actually forge the steel and write the code in time for the fast-approaching launch window. Stick with me here, because you and I are looking at the absolute biggest shift in modern philosophy. Even a juggernaut like SpaceX has been put on strict notice just because a company managed to win a lucrative government contract back in 2022. That does not guarantee them a ticket to the lunar surface today. The old loyalties are dead and buried. The only thing that matters in this brutal new era is flawless, rapid execution. If you cannot deliver the hardware, you will be left completely in the dust. The absolute first aerospace company to hit their punishing deadlines and prove their machine can survive the void will earn the ultimate prize. They will be the ones chosen to carry American astronauts back down to the gray, dusty surface of the moon. The pressure is suffocating. The hard deadline for the Artemis 3 mission has been aggressively pulled forward to next year, 2027, and once that new lunar landing vehicle is finally selected and validated in orbit, the winning engineers will not get a single second to rest. They will be expected to keep pushing the boundaries of physics and manufacturing at a terrifyingly incredible speed. The clock is ticking constantly. Think about the crushing reality of what these engineers are facing right now. They possess only a handful of frantic months to successfully execute an uncrewed, automated landing on the moon, prove the hardware does not shatter on impact, and then immediately turn around to finalize the design for Artemis 4. That monumental mission is now locked in for early 2028. You are witnessing the exact timeline for when humanity officially returns to the lunar surface, plunging straight down into the shadowed, treacherous terrain of the South Pole region. It is a staggeringly dangerous location, but it is the only place that holds the key to our long-term survival off this world. But we have to remember Isaacman's uncompromising promise to the world. This entire endeavor is absolutely not about planting another piece of fabric in the dirt, and taking a victory lap. To make their dominating intentions violently clear to rival nations, the agency is going to land human beings on the lunar surface in 2028 and then launch Artemis 5 before that exact same year is even over. I know that sounds like a completely delusional, overly ambitious fantasy, but you have to realize that this breakneck adrenaline-fueled pace is exactly how our space program used to operate during the legendary golden era of orbital exploration. We are waking a sleeping giant. If we look back at the history books, the total turnaround time between Neil Armstrong stepping off Apollo 11 and the subsequent landing of Apollo 12 was a mind-blowing 120 days, executing 2 lunar missions. In 2028 is far more than just an arrogant geopolitical flex to intimidate rival nations. This blistering schedule is meant to forcefully establish the new permanent tempo for human spaceflight. From this point forward, we are going to witness a fresh crew of hardened explorers arriving on the desolate lunar surface. Once every 6 months, like clockwork, we are watching the chaotic frontier slowly transform into a scheduled transit route. This exact moment in 2028 is the critical juncture where the agency completely pivots its massive resources toward building a permanent, fortified human outpost on another celestial body, and to survive in that hostile environment, they have to ruthlessly prioritize heavy surface operations over absolutely everything else. Because of this stark reality of physics and funding, the highly publicized Lunar Gateway, that orbital space station meant to circle the moon, has been completely removed from the immediate table. You are seeing them make the incredibly painful but necessary choices required to keep human beings alive in the dirt rather than floating comfortably in orbit just because the orbital station was suddenly scrapped from the immediate timeline. It definitely does not mean all those years of labor and massive financial investments were simply thrown into a black hole. The engineers are far too resourceful for that kind of waste. Every single piece of complex life support hardware, every pressurized module, and every advanced communicati, an array that was already being forged for the gateway, is actively being repurposed. You can see the genius in the pivot. They are taking the shattered pieces of an orbital dream and using them as the absolute foundational building blocks for the very first permanent lunar base on the surface. Nothing goes to waste. We are going to watch the grueling physical construction of this extraterrestrial fortress unfold over the next 7 terrifyingly dangerous years. To make this science fiction reality happen, the agency has firmly locked in a massive war chest, budgeting $20 billion to overcome the brutal physics of the lunar environment. This entire colonization effort is going to play out in 3 incredibly distinct high-stakes phases, and the clock for Phase 1 starts ticking right now, covering 2026 to 2028. The absolute primary directive here is securing a fiercely reliable, high-frequency launch cadence that can successfully punch through the atmosphere to the surface. Securing that vital supply chain means violently ramping up production to launch 25 separate missions into the black within just 3 short years. We are going to see 21 of those rockets attempt a terrifying descent to the lunar surface, while only 2 of these flights will risk carrying a fragile human crew. The vast majority of this initial phase is purely about survival testing. They have to experiment with radically new, heavy-duty technologies that will keep the future base operators breathing. And perhaps the most awe-inspiring and slightly Terrifying part of this entire blueprint is that we are going to witness them launch active nuclear power sources to the moon. The grim reality is that there is a massive, deadly sunlight problem on the lunar surface, and harnessing the raw, terrifying power of nuclear energy is the absolute only way to beat it. The slow, grinding day and night cycle up there is completely alien compared to the comforting 24 hours we experience here on Earth. When the Artemis base is finally built, the colonists will first endure 2 relentless, blinding weeks of continuous, unbroken solar radiation, but then the horizon will swallow the sun, and the entire human settlement will be violently plunged into another 14 days of absolute, suffocating darkness. That long night is what keeps the mission planners awake, surviving that 14-day lunar eclipse is going to be the ultimate test of human engineering. As soon as the sun dips below that curved horizon, the ambient temperature outside the habitat modules will instantly plummet to a staggering -200 degrees Celsius. At that level of deep cosmic cold, the basic laws of physics become your worst enemy. Without a massive, relentlessly reliable source of artificial heat, every single piece of external hardware, every rover battery, and every life support valve will completely freeze solid. You and I are watching humanity try to figure out how to keep the blood flowing in an environment that actively wants to turn everything to ice. Freezing completely solid tends to be a permanent death sentence for delicate aerospace electronics. And those frozen circuits absolutely do not just magically come back to life when the sun finally decides to rise again. To fight back against the lethal cold, the agency is preparing to deploy an array of radioisotope thermal generators. Think about the sheer audacity of this solution. They are taking incredibly dense, highly radioactive elements, like plutonium, that are actively, violently decaying at the atomic level. This natural decay constantly vomits out raw thermal energy, and engineers are going to capture that exact heat to keep our fragile lunar assets from dying in the dark. So what exact kind of vital machinery are we desperately trying to keep alive through the long, freezing lunar night? Well, you are about to see a radically terrifying new method of off-world exploration, because the agency is deploying a fleet of heavily armed rocket drones. They have officially dubbed this aggressive new vehicle program Moonfall. It is a brilliant evolution based directly on the Ingenuity helicopter that successfully conquered the thin atmosphere of Mars, but since the moon has absolutely no air to catch a spinning propeller blade, these sleek drones are equipped with clustered arrays of explosive, miniaturized rocket thrusters to violently blast themselves across the sky. Witnessing these machines ignite in the vacuum is going to be visually spectacular. Every single drone is engineered to violently burn its fuel for a maximum of 150 seconds per hop, soaring over the jagged, gray landscape to cover distances up to 50 kilometers in a single bound. The mission planners are specifically deploying this airborne swarm to aggressively map out the most dangerous, terrifyingly hard to reach environments on the lunar surface. We will watch them dive straight into the pitch black edges of deep impact craters and ascend the treacherous, towering peaks of ancient lunar mountains where a traditional wheeled vehicle would be instantly destroyed. While the drones map the skies during Phase 1, we are also going to watch the heavy machinery roll out onto the dirt. The space agency is finally unleashing their highly anticipated Viper rover to conquer the rough terrain. Picture a rugged, incredibly dense golf cart-sized scientific laboratory that has already been fully constructed relentlessly stress-tested and locked in a clean room, desperately waiting for a rocket ride into the black for years. 2027 is finally going to be the year. It breaks free from Earth's gravity. We will watch this mechanical beast safely touch down on the lunar surface, hitching a ride inside the massive cargo bay of a Blue Origin lander. The second those heavy metal wheels hit the lunar dust, this machine has one critical, unyielding objective. It will aggressively begin mapping out the permanently shadowed regions of the lunar South Pole, hunting in the absolute darkness for confirmed, harvestable deposits of ancient water ice. It is also scanning the regolith for volatile, life-saving materials like trapped hydrogen, pure oxygen, and heavily concentrated rare earth metals. This is not just basic science anymore. The agency literally refers to this aggressive campaign as lunar prospecting. Finding and securing these hidden resources is the only way humanity survives when the massive construction crews arrive in Phase 3. The prospecting rover will not be out there facing the vast, silent darkness entirely alone. We are going to watch it get massive backup, joined on the harsh ground by two heavily armored lunar terrain vehicles. One of these massive machines is designed with manual overrides, specifically built to be physically driven across the craters by our suited crew members. The second unit is a terrifyingly intelligent, autonomous drone, prowling the gray dirt completely on its own. Each of these mechanical beasts is engineered with a massive energy reserve, giving them the raw power to fiercely navigate and heavily explore up to 900 kilometers of the unforgiving lunar surface without failing. But do not mistake these heavy machines for simple joyriding science buggies. We are watching the dawn of off-world heavy industry, and these vehicles are going to be ruthlessly put to work as heavy-duty construction equipment. You will see them hauling massive life support generators and actively leveling the jagged lunar ground to pour the very first foundations of the permanent settlement. And watching over this entire chaotic construction site from the absolute silence of orbit will be an advanced new swarm of lunar communication and observation satellites. They are building an invisible, high-speed web of data right above the colonists' heads to keep them tethered to their home world. This brand new orbital network is going to completely rewrite how the human race experiences the cosmos. These high-powered satellites will aggressively lock onto signals and allow absolutely continuous, unbroken data streaming from any remote, treacherous location on the Moon directly back to the surface of the Earth. And they are pushing an astonishing 500 megabytes per second of raw, uninterrupted throughput. We are talking about a flawless, terrifyingly clear umbilical cord of information on top of that heavy data lifting. This synchronized orbital swarm will provide a breathtaking, continuous, unblinking view of the entire lunar surface, watching humanity's greatest triumph from space. Now, this massive technological leap is incredibly important to you and me because it means we are not just going to read about this in a history book. The space agency has officially mandated that every single piece of hardware we just talked about, the explosive rocket drones, the heavy prospecting rovers, the rugged electric terrain vehicles, they are all going to be permanently equipped with military-grade high-definition cameras. You are going to be able to pull out your phone and live stream their terrifying, awe-inspiring missions directly from the vacuum of space in crystal-clear resolution, straight to your living room. The entire human race is going to watch this base get built. Watching that incredible footage brings us directly to the terrifying reality of Phase 2, the massive chaotic transition into actually constructing an extraterrestrial city. This monumental effort violently plays out from 2029 to 2032. We are going to witness an unbelievable 27 heavy rocket launches, followed by 24 heart-stopping lunar landings. This window is where we see the incredibly fragile, pressurized permanent habitation modules finally drop from orbit into the dust. We are watching the delivery of massive excavation machines designed to rip apart the moon's surface, dig deep trenches for buried power lines, and carve out our new home. I stand on the edge of a massive crater and watch a shadow slowly inch across the gray dust. It is a 15,000-kilogram machine built by the Japanese Space Agency and Toyota, rolling toward us. You and I are looking at the future of off-world travel, an entire apartment on wheels inside that heavily armored shell. The astronauts aren't wearing bulky white suits. They are sitting comfortably in short-sleeved shirts, sipping water, entirely safe from the vacuum just inches away. The vehicle crawls forward at a painfully slow 3.5 kilometers per hour, but it will keep moving at that exact pace for days on end without stopping. This massive rolling fortress is designed to survive out here for an entire decade. It is built to keep those inside alive for up to 150 straight hours in the absolute freezing blackness of the lunar night. But as we watch this second phase of lunar expansion unfold, the sheer scale of the energy required becomes staggering. Surviving this hostile environment demands far more power than humanity has ever tried to harness in space. They are drawing that energy from two completely different sources to guarantee survival. Naturally, the very first flavor of power we see them deploying across the gray landscape is the energy of the sun. Look closely at those tall masts rising from the dust. Massive solar panels are mounted on top of those incredibly long poles, angled perfectly to drink in every possible drop of sunlight before the horizon swallows it. All that light feeds down into massive battery systems buried nearby for long-term storage. But the sun alone cannot keep the cold away. To survive, they are bringing the raw heat of the atom. NASA is dropping actual nuclear fission reactors onto the surface. These are not just tiny heaters. They are generating hundreds of watts of steady electricity, pumping constant, reliable lifeblood into multiple rovers and outposts all at the exact same time. As we watch these machines do their quiet work, Phase 2 reaches its terrifying and beautiful conclusion. Every wire, every solar mast, and every pressure seal is now perfectly placed to support human beings, surviving out here for weeks at a time. But then comes Phase 3. This is the exact moment everything changes. Fast forward with me to the year 2033 and beyond. We are no longer just visiting this barren rock. We are packing our bags and moving in. The defining crown jewel of this third stage is exactly what we have been dreaming of for generations: the permanent, unbroken habitation of the Artemis moon base. Earth has finally expanded. Right in front of us, the scale of this achievement comes into sharp focus. NASA has planned it so that rotating crew of 4 brave people can stay out here, living and working on the surface for 28 continuous days per mission. I watch them floating slowly through the transparent corridors of multiple connected modules. Think of it as a sprawling space station, well, like the International Space Station or the Gateway orbiting above us. But with one massive difference: this giant metal structure is firmly anchored into solid ground. It is humanity taking its first real breath of life on a world that was never meant for us. Deep inside the metallic heart of these connected living quarters, a dedicated nuclear fission generator hums quietly, keeping the cold vacuum at bay. Surviving out here means depending on a massive supply chain from Earth, with cargo ships dropping around 8,000 kilograms of desperately needed food, water, and breathable air into the dust every single month. But looking just outside the reinforced windows of the base, we are witnessing a massive shift in how humanity survives. NASA is rolling out the heavy machines for their first real attempt at local resource harvesting. They are learning how to live off the deadly land itself instead of bringing Earth with them. Out on the gray horizon, mechanical arms tear into the ancient dirt. They are ripping up raw rock and topsoil, processing the harsh environment and forcing it to work to our advantage. The most terrifying and beautiful sight is down in the pitch-black shadows of the deep craters, where machines scrape ancient, frozen water directly out of the ice reserves. That ancient ice is the literal key to our survival. Once they melt it down, they run powerful electric currents through the water, shattering the molecules apart. Suddenly, the dead moon is giving us fresh oxygen to fill the astronauts' lungs and highly explosive hydrogen to fuel the rockets that will carry us deeper into the dark. The ingenuity out here is absolutely wild. Watch what those autonomous rovers are doing near the edge of the camp. NASA has set up massive three-dimensional printers that actually scoop up the razor-sharp lunar dust, superheating it until it turns to thick liquid, and then pouring it like heavy gray cement. Layer by layer, they are literally cooking the dirt to build the first genuinely permanent, radiation-proof structures anywhere outside our home planet. You and I might be standing here thinking that this whole operation sounds completely insane, like they are trying to conquer the literal impossible, right? And if you are thinking that, I promise you are not crazy at all. Even the brightest minds back at NASA have openly admitted that this entirely insane endeavor is dancing right on the razor-sharp edge of impossible. But standing here on the dust, looking up at the black sky, you realize that is exactly the point. We are not launching ourselves into this freezing vacuum because it is a simple task. We are doing it specifically because it is hard enough to push humanity to its absolute limit. And we are not the only ones looking up. The Chinese are already out here too, fully prepared to achieve their own nearly impossible things in the dark. These are the terrifying, high-stakes realities of the new global space race playing out before our eyes. The old ways of playing it safe simply will not work anymore. Merely being good enough is completely unacceptable when the vacuum of space is constantly trying to kill you. But looking at these glowing habitats, it is obvious that NASA has suddenly remembered a vital piece of their identity, something they had lost track of for decades, because here is the biggest secret hidden beneath all this incredible technology. The real underlying objective of this billion-dollar Artemis operation is not actually about laying concrete in the dirt. It is not really about building a shiny lunar outpost or extracting ice from a dead crater. The true goal is much bigger than any of that. The absolute imperative of everything happening in front of us is to ignite a fire in the minds of the next generation. It is about inspiring the young engineers and scientists watching from Earth, the kids sitting in classrooms right now who will grow up to achieve things that we would swear are impossible today. But those bright minds will never push the boundaries of human survival if they do not have a massive, terrifyingly beautiful goal staring back at them to spark that motivation. It is NASA's profound duty to stand up and lead by bold example, taking the hardest hits so others can follow. For a long time, that bold fire was missing from our skies, but standing here today, feeling the low rumble of machines carving a home out of dead rock, you and I can see that the grand future of humanity is finally back on track. We are crossing the void, and we are not looking back. The universe is hostile and dark, but watching the lights of human persistence switch on across the gray plains makes it incredibly beautiful. If you are ready to look even further ahead, if you want to witness the stunning vision of a sprawling NASA city, glowing on the lunar surface, well beyond the limits of Phase 3, then click the box on your screen right now and step further into the deep unknown with me.